Medieval royal feasts were meant to showcase wealth and power, but sometimes they turned into complete disasters. From exploding pies to drunk food tasters, these kitchen catastrophes changed the course of royal dinners forever. In 1528, King Henry VIII's head cook wanted to create something truly spectacular, a massive pie with a live peacock inside that would spread its feathers when served. The cook spent days preparing the special pastry shell and designing a complex system of ropes and pulleys to make the bird emerge dramatically. But things went terribly wrong at the feast. When servants lifted the pie's lid, the frightened peacock panicked and exploded from its pastry prison, sending hot gravy everywhere and showering nearby nobles with pie crust. The bird flew around the great hall, knocking over candles and causing complete chaos. Henry VIII, however, found the whole disaster hilarious and actually gave the cook a raise. This incident started a trend of deliberately including surprising elements in royal feasts, though most chefs stuck to safer options like hidden musicians or jesters. Let's travel to 14th century Burgundy, where one royal feast went off the rails thanks to a food taster who hit the wine a bit too hard. The Duke of Burgundy was hosting an important diplomatic dinner, and his trusted food taster, Jean-Claude, had the crucial job of checking each dish for poison. But Jean-Claude started sampling the Duke's finest wines early in the day. By dinner time, he was swaying on his feet and declaring everything absolutely perfect without actually tasting it. The nervous chef tried to slow him down, but Jean-Claude kept drinking and eventually passed out face first into a bowl of soup. The Duke had to postpone the entire feast since no one would eat without the food being properly tested. This embarrassing incident led to new rules about food tasters staying sober on duty. The year was 1476, and Windsor Castle's head chef Thomas Weston was determined to make his mark in royal cooking history. He planned to serve King Edward IV a flaming roasted swan, but with a dangerous twist. Weston soaked the bird in strong brandy and added extra alcohol to make the flames reach the ceiling. As servants carried the blazing dish into the great hall, a gust of wind from an open window turned the controlled flames into a fire tornado. The burning liquor spilled onto tapestries and wooden tables, sending guests running in panic. Quick-thinking servants used barrels of wine to douse the flames, saving the castle but ruining the feast. The kitchen staff spent weeks cleaning sticky wine residue off the walls. After this close call, Edward IV banned flaming dishes at royal dinners, and chefs had to find safer ways to impress their guests. In 1364, at the French royal court, a feast for visiting Italian nobles turned into a complete disaster when the main dish, an expensive meat stew, was found to be full of rats. The kitchen staff had stored ingredients in an old cellar, not knowing it was home to dozens of rats. During cooking, these unwanted guests fell into the huge pots from the rafters above. When the royal server lifted the lid at dinner, several cooked rats floated to the surface. The Italian guests were horrified, and the French King Charles V was so embarrassed he fired his entire kitchen staff. This event led to major changes in royal food storage. All ingredients had to be kept in sealed containers, and kitchens were regularly checked for pests. The story became such a scandal that for years afterward, French nobles would jokingly ask if the ragout was rat-free before eating. Let's head to Scotland in 1449, where a royal wedding feast turned into a spectacular mess. For the marriage of King James II to Mary of Guelders, royal bakers created a towering cake masterpiece. 8 tiers of spiced fruit cake held together with honey and decorated with sugar sculptures. The cake stood as tall as 2 men and was the centerpiece of the wedding feast. But the Scottish summer heat had other plans. Just as the king and queen approached to cut the first slice, the honey holding the tiers together began to melt. The entire tower started to lean like a sugary tower of Pisa. Guests watched in horror as the massive cake collapsed, crushing several smaller desserts and splashing wine cups. The quick-thinking court jester saved the day by diving into the mess head first, making everyone laugh and turning disaster into entertainment. In 1515, at the Spanish court, a nervous new pastry chef made a mistake that would become legendary. While preparing Queen Joanna's favorite almond pastries, He accidentally used a large bowl of salt instead of sugar. The kitchen was especially busy that day, preparing for a feast with French ambassadors. When the Queen took her first bite of the dessert, her face turned from delight to shock. She spat out the salty pastry, causing nearby courtiers to gasp. The French ambassadors thought they were being pranked, and tensions rose quickly. The head chef tasted the pastry and nearly fainted. His new assistant had used almost 2 pounds of salt. This mistake led to a new rule. All ingredients had to be clearly labeled and double-checked before use. Let me tell you about a royal feast in 1512, where someone thought releasing doves would be elegant. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. The royal event planner had a grand vision of white doves gracefully flying out of golden cages as guests enjoyed their meal. But these weren't trained doves, they were regular birds grabbed from the castle grounds that morning. When released, instead of soaring majestically overhead, the panicked birds dive-bombed the guests, knocked over wine goblets, and helped themselves to food from plates. One particularly bold dove even snatched a piece of bread right from a duchess's hand. The birds refused to leave through the windows, creating absolute chaos, until servants managed to lure them out with grain. After this feathery fiasco, live birds were banned from royal dining rooms across Europe. In 1302, a grand feast at the Norwegian royal court turned into a stomach-churning nightmare. King Haakon V wanted to show off his kingdom's wealth with an elaborate spread of seafood. The star dish was meant to be fresh fish from the fjords, but a delay in the fishing boats meant the catch sat in the summer heat too long. Nobody thought to check if the fish had gone bad, they just covered it in heavy spices and sauces. Within hours, over 100 nobles were sick. The castle only had 2 outhouses, creating a very unpleasant situation. The court doctor tried helping with his special medicine, a mix of herbs and strong alcohol, which only made things worse. The king himself was spared only because he'd been late to dinner dealing with a trade dispute. This disaster led to new rules about food freshness and storage at royal courts across Europe. The 1461 coronation feast of Edward IV was meant to be unforgettable, but not quite like this. The royal engineers had created a magnificent wine fountain that would flow with expensive French red wine throughout the celebration. The fountain worked perfectly during testing with water, but they didn't account for wine's different properties. When activated, the pressure built up too quickly, and the fountain exploded like a volcano of red wine. The precious drink sprayed across the great hall, soaking the guests' expensive clothes and turning white tablecloths into purple disasters. The wine even reached the ceiling, staining the newly painted murals that had taken months to complete. Several nobles slipped on the wine-soaked floor while trying to escape the spray, creating a scene that looked more like slapstick comedy than a royal celebration. In 1398, the kitchen staff at England's Westminster Palace finally had enough. After being forced to prepare feasts for 3 straight days with no rest, they staged a clever protest. When ordered to make a massive dinner for 200 nobles, the exhausted cooks simply stopped cooking halfway through. They served partially raw venison, cold soups, and half-baked bread to the bewildered guests. The nobles were outraged, but the head cook boldly told the king's steward that tired cooks make dangerous mistakes. This rebellion actually worked. It led to new rules giving kitchen staff mandatory rest periods and better working conditions. The incident became known as the Raw Revolt and showed that even medieval workers could successfully stand up for their rights. Thanks for exploring these hilarious royal dining disasters with me. History shows even kings and queens had their embarrassing moments. If you enjoyed these stories, hit that like button, subscribe for more historical mishaps, and share with your food-loving friends.